Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Friday debrief.
Hi, happy Friday.
Happy Friday. So it's been a while actually since we've been together, and I've noticed that you brought a few friends. So I'm very excited, Robin, to have the second grade team here joining us. Thank you, teachers, for joining us in the Friday debrief. Our plan today is really just to unpack some of the work that you've been doing, and I know you've been very busy. So let's start, Robin, by maybe having the teachers introduce themselves. Bilkis, do you want to start?
Hi, yes, I'm Belkis Marku. I am a second grade teacher.
I'm
Thanks for
Diane.
joining us today.
Thank
I'm
you.
Diane Litvinny. I'm a second grade teacher.
Hi, I'm Kim Clancy. I also am a second grade teacher.
We have the whole team here.
Yay.
And Robin, why don't you tell us a little bit about well, everybody knows that you've been working very hard on the third grade writing scores, but in our discussions, we thought, we really should begin to reach out to the second grade team because they're very instrumental in helping pave the road for the work we're going to be doing with third graders. So you want to unpack the work you've been doing with the team and talk to us a little bit about what you guys have been working on this week.
Of course. And it's just always so nice to work with colleagues. So I have to say, that's also a benefit to vertically kind of working on this data project together. So yes, we've been analyzing a lot of data in third grade and looking at those third grade standards. The teachers were thinking, and when we were looking at this, Janine, we were kind of saying, how can we give the edge to second graders to come in so that they are set up for success in third grade. So using my data analysis as a kind of a compass or a guide to looking at what students are required to do in third grade, not only based on our standards, but on the assessments that we give, we wanted to say, how can we set these students up for success? So that's exactly what we did. We used our structured planning model that we were using in third grade to help give them a foundation of structured planning for their writing. And we brought it down into second grade to see how they would do. And again, of course, just sprinkling a little bit of this down, looking to share. Can they come up with some common vocabulary, common language?
So, Robin, I just want to interrupt for a minute because the structured planning model, for anybody who's not familiar with it, you're referring to the ICE-T model, right?
I am, yes. The
Okay.
ICE-T, which again is the introduce, cite, explain, and your final thoughts, bringing that down so that we could look at how second graders are working toward, some of that structured planning for their writing. And what can we do in second grade in order for them to make that smooth bridging transition into third grade so that we can start right away in September and get the ball rolling and set them up for success.
I love that. They'll be so familiar with it then. Mm-hmm. That'd be great.
Absolutely. So the third grade teachers went into the second grade classrooms and we modeled how we plan in third grade using some sentence starters, using our ICE-T format for planning. And then we gave the students a task to do using simple sentence starters for that introduce, cite, explain, and final thoughts. And then we ran that data when they were done. And we looked for gaps in patterns of learning based on a rubric that actually we created. And I'm going to share my screen with you. A rubric that we actually created for second grade based on third grade standards. And I put the third grade standards into AI, and I asked them to give me a second grade rubric to score the second grade data. So this is the rubric that we used, and we scored their data, and we found really great learning that's going on in second grade, first of all. But we also found different ways that we can kind of sprinkle in some of these patterns of learning by using common language, by having the teachers possibly and orally rehearse with the students some things like restating, flipping the question. This means, this shows, this proves. And I just want to share one thing with you before I break it into a discussion, because I used this data to gauge my thinking. When the students came into third grade, their student one score they scored a 1, and that was okay because they're coming into third grade. We don't, they're just leaving second grade, coming in, and you can see that some of the things that we want to improve should be the evidence, clearer transitions, and more elaboration, which again are third grade skills that we are working on. So at the end of third grade, this is the same student that I used the data for in the beginning of third grade. And you can see that they started to put some quotes in. They connected their, story events. They had deeper reasoning and more structure in their reasoning and more relevant evidence. So with that being said, the third grade teacher sat down after tracking all this data and said, how can we sprinkle some of this down to second grade to make them more successful in third grade? And that's the vertical connection we want to talk about today.
Sounds good. So, teachers, I know that we have had opportunities for the kids to come in, or actually for Robin to come in and teach a lesson. And then today, the kids were working in the classroom. So how do you feel they've been responding to the ICE-T method? And do you think it's something that is appropriate for second graders to begin working on?
Okay. I definitely think it's appropriate for them to begin working on it. I think they need more work in it. I think in second grade, we don't get started with really writing responses till maybe a little later in the year. And so I definitely think it's appropriate. And we could certainly get it started earlier, as you just said, through oral practice and introducing the language.
Yeah, and I feel like we can do that through our read alouds where we're reading a common book, and we can use that ICE-T as a way to discuss and verbally rehearse, and that way, again, that kind of encourages common language. And then, we can then, of course, introduce it as they are reading their individual books. I do believe that when Robin came in, that ICE-T structure really was a bit of a comfort level for them. Because often writing about reading is big and wide, and you can, start in many ways. So I feel like the predictability and the structure of that ICE-T, although were parts of it that were challenging, I felt it was definitely helpful. I think one of the things we found as we looked at the data is that they could do the I think, and they could sort of cite the text, maybe not as in depth as we wanted. So one of the things we talked about was page numbers and quotes to help them. But that explain part, which is that making meaning part, which is really the piece that Robin was referring to, is the most difficult part for those third graders. And for sure it was for second grade as well, to make that meaning and then to have a final thought. We've been working on, I think, and I know this because, so that first part, that I and the C, they're pretty good at, although the C they could cite a little more specifically. It's really that the E part, the explaining it, and the final thought part, which we know is the way to bump them up on the rubric. That really is the piece that we need to help them work toward being better at. So exposing them to the ICE-T structure, talking about it through read alouds. I created some rings with the ICE-T. So each card has like the I, the C, the E, and that can kind of help them kind of talk through the thinking part. And there's some sentence starters in there for each step of that ICE-T. So I felt like that has been helpful in like kind of rehearsing and just knowing the steps of that structure. So that common language I think is really important. A lot of them haven't really heard ICE-T. We don't use ICE-T normally in second grade, so that was a whole new thing for them. But they were excited to embrace it, and the idea that that's going to help them in third grade.
Yeah. And Belkis, I know you came down from teaching third grade to second grade last year. How did you feel like that lesson went? Because you know what they have to do in third grade. You know the third grade expectations.
Well, whenever Linda came into my class to teach it, my kids responded very well to the ICE-T. They really loved it. It was very age appropriate for them. So I felt for them to have that and get that started in second grade, that they would feel more confident going into third grade, because third grade is a big jump, whether it's the within the writing. So they really enjoyed it. They actually said, can we do more iced tea after we did that? So I think it's great to start it now.
And although that depth of knowledge, those 3 questions, those 3 M's, and within that explanation part, make it your own. What does it mean, and why does it matter to the theme of the the lesson learned? Why does it matter? I feel like that's the hard part, and again, it's not always second grade appropriate for them to be able to do that. They're developmentally, they may not be able to do that. But if they know the wording and the language, and we're modeling it for them, it just gives them a little bit more of a setup for success when they come into 3rd grade and they're said, oh, we heard that already. And then we can kind of take the ball rolling from there and, give them the standards that we need to put in for them to be successful.
Yeah, and I think, I think a lot of our hope was that if the 2nd grade teachers kind of knew where the 3rd grade teachers were going with these 3 guiding questions, that then you could incorporate that through modeling into your read aloud. So as you're reading to kids, you could rephrase, say, you know what, I'm gonna say this in my own words and make it my own and restate it for them. So then they've heard it before, and they're used to thinking through these comprehension questions or these elaboration questions, which will lead to the more in-depth and detailed writing.
I definitely
piggyback what you said, Robin, and that's the idea. I wonder if a lot of them developmentally are. Do you see this? I'm going to ask you a question. Do you see this like on a continuum where you're looking like maybe in the beginning we're just introducing vocabulary and then it's a modeling thing? And, I'd like to know how you see this going along and at what point you might expect them to be able to do it coming into 3rd grade here. Because I agree with you. Those words like make it your own. Mm-hmm. What, you know what I mean? That to me, it's not, that's kind of like, what does that mean? But to me, kind of like the word sight, that's a word I could use. We don't use sight. We may throw it out there here and there, but you know what I mean? We say, go back, find evidence and stuff. So I think a common vocabulary there, some words are harder to teach. Do you see it? Like, I'm going to introduce the vocabulary, maybe start with that. And then maybe we're going to, tell me about your vision.
That's a great question because, the way that teachers teach, we reflect a lot, right? So after looking at this data analysis and looking at them coming in from 2nd grade to 3rd grade, we started at the very beginning. And today, it kind of came full circle for me because I went into model the iced tea and in your classrooms, but my kids never did that to younger students, to their peers. So today we went into Miss Marcoux's class and I said to them, and this is where your question comes in, Kim, I said, think back to when you came to 3rd grade. Think of what we did in the beginning. There was a lot of sentence starters. There was a lot of highlighting different colors to show the evidence, to show what does the theme mean, to show the quotations. That we did a lot of that, almost probably for the beginning of the year, I would say until at least November, December. And I know Janine came in and we've done this together. Then we had a big graduation ceremony because we finally graduated to using such a structure to now finding our writer's voice and elaborating on our structured plan. So we went from, a long plan of doing this every day, of vocabulary and really kind of getting them to know the foundation of this plan so they can write, to plan short, write long. Quick plan, write long. And actually one of the kids quoted that today when we went in, and they remembered that, and they taught their 2nd grade partner that. So is it a skill that they come in with from the beginning of the year? No, absolutely not. This is a work in progress. And I feel like if they know the word, some of the words, and you've modeled some of that for them, my hope as a 3rd grade teacher is that I can continue like part B from there, Kim, right? So that I could then say, because again, developmentally, what does this mean? How to make it your own? Sometimes they don't even know how to flip the question, never mind make it their own. So those are the things that in third grade we develop, as well as into fourth grade, because that's a fourth grade standard as well, but just having kind of that same vocabulary and common theme together, I feel like helps them. When I went into Belky's class today, my third grade students went into her class today, and I told them they were now the teachers. I'm not the teacher anymore today. You are the teacher. You're taking ownership on what you've learned. And we read a read aloud, and we focused a lot on the theme today, because theme is also hard for students. Coming from second to third grade. We focused on theme a lot today, and my students sat with each of their partners, and they went through the iced tea with them. And I said, I don't want the second graders to write or type. I want them to tell you. I want you to ask them questions. I want you to ask them, what would they write for the I? What would they write for the C? I want you to give them sentence starters. Miss Belky's had her rings out. They were looking at it orally. They were orally rehearsing together. And my students were taking notes and typing and coming up with the plan and asking good questions. And I said, oh my gosh, they're like little mini me's. They're like, that was repetitive. Can you come up with another word to say mad? So just by us modeling it, they're getting to know the language and the vocabulary. And this was their feedback today. I asked them for their feedback, both second and third grade. I said, now you reflect on what you did. And I said, second graders, what do you feel like you're more strong at coming in, knowing this, this iced tea and this structured planning? And these were their words, and I wrote it down. They said, now they know the words restate, elaborate, repetition, underline the title, quick plan, write long, and compound sentences. So just from that 40-minute lesson of now learn, teach, and lead, right? Now my kids are leading the way. They were able to do that. And now those kids hopefully will hold on to some of that vocabulary or concepts moving into third grade. And that's really what vertical tracking of data does. It kind of targets that lesson. It really personalizes the instruction for the students. And it gives us that bridge that there's no gap coming from, June to September. And we can just kind of do like part B of the series now.
Right. Well, I have to say, even if the kids were just exposed now and again to the language, I think one of the things that we were thinking is that it was such a heavy lift for us this year to go back and work on all those elaboration questions. Like, I think the iced tea, we've seen they can catch on to that pretty quickly. If we introduce it in second grade, we won't need to spend nearly as much time in third grade because they're familiar with it. Yeah. But those comprehension questions, the idea of reading something and being able to restate it in your own words, making it your own, explaining what it means, and more the hardest question of all, why it matters, to the point you're trying to prove. That was a heavy lift this year, a very heavy lift. So we thought if we could start to sprinkle that in and read alouds in the second grade, certainly you do plenty of comprehension work, but specifically using those questions now and again, it might sort of prime the engine for us and make it a little smoother sailing in third grade. So,
and even using that language, like we talk more about what was the lesson learned, but really we could take that, what was the lesson learned, and take it a step further to talk about theme. And how that lesson learned connects to the theme of the book. So I think just rewording our words, we were reading that book, Choice Words, and just using, rewording some of what we say to tailor for third grade, I do think is important.
So do you foresee, Robin, putting together a list of these common words?
Oh, good idea.
Is that the first step? I'm coming in second grade next year. I want to make sure I'm using the right words. So do you foresee putting that list together, like almost like a vocabulary list? Make sure when you're discussing, don't use text evidence, use cite, or don't use, what is the lesson, use theme, or do you, like, instead of this, like a if then,
Right, absolutely.
Use this.
That's a great idea, Kim, because you know what? That is important. So, even like working together, just having this conversation is so meaningful because that's such a great idea. Like what are words that we use? Like lesson learned could be theme in third grade,
Yeah.
And, just to have that common vocabulary right on hand would benefit all of us because it's, we're not working harder, we're working smarter. And I just want to share one more thing with you before we leave. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And here are our standards, right? And just looking at these standards, and this brings me back to your question, Kim. In second grade, they have to understand key details, yet in third grade, they have to specifically cite evidence, right? So looking at that, again, like Diane said, understanding what was said, but we could also call it citing, so kind of quoting, citing. What inference can you make? Kind of we're bringing that down into third grade from fourth grade. So some of these key vocabulary are right within our standards that we're teaching every day, so kind of going back to the basic of the why are we doing this, right? Why are we doing this to make sure the students are all, are all ready for success based on the standards that we have to teach, looking at these standards, using some of that vocabulary, second to third to fourth, that common language, I think would be an excellent way to approach it.
Yeah, and the questions I'm looking at there, that you could easily do that restating of the question in those. Very basic. Who were the characters in this? The characters were, that is a definite able to do in second grade sort of a thing, just starting out easy. And we do that, but we don't necessarily ask those simple, I don't know. We ask them maybe a little bit more like, who are the characters and what do you think of them? Maybe we should just stick with the, that restating of that question very simply. What was the setting? The setting was, you know what I mean? That's an easy skill. So we're not so much focusing on the, did you get it? Well, we are focusing on that, but we're also focusing on the restating of the question in your answer. So that is something that could easily be done.
Which I think is really important. I find sometimes my kids are very answer driven. Like, what's the answer? Get it done, get it like boom, boom, boom. But not so much taking the time to kind of slow down and restate and also think a little deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're a get it done generation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a little like right. We used to do that. We used to do it all the time, restating the question and flipping the answer. That was a skill we taught. So we can do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and looking at these standards as a whole, like, and again, this is not all of second grade, like coming into the spring of, April, May, June, sprinkling some of these down, just like April, May, June of third grade, we're sprinkling down that depth of knowledge, that analysis. Because if you notice, it's a fourth grade skill, deeper analysis and explanation. But to sprinkle it down, the students are finding more success, So even if we can just kind of vertically work through that second, third, and fourth grade, I think definitely it's, it's something that will only benefit the students even more and make them more successful. And working together, collaborating. There's nothing like teacher collaboration to get the job done.
Yes, definitely. And we're really, trying to help with that transition from one grade to the next. I think that's really important as well. As a matter of fact, second grade teachers, just to share with you, the third grade team is doing a parent night coming up soon to teach parents how to work with their kids using this structured writing plan and helping them elaborate if they want to work with them over the summer. And that was actually a request that we got from the parents because the kids have shown such interest and confidence in their writing this year because of this model and because of the the deep work they've been doing in this area, that the kids actually want to write now, and the parents wanted to encourage it and keep it going through the summer. Can you imagine that? So it's pretty exciting stuff.
Well, when you're good at something, you're feeling good about something, you do want to keep it going, right?
And that's what I saw today in Belky's, right? When they went into your class, that confidence that they had as teachers to teach the second grade. You know, I mean, they really, and they were asking good questions. We were listening in, and, you know, they were really experts on the topic. And what a great sense of accomplishment to leave third grade and go to fourth grade with.
Yeah.
Even the feedback they were giving the second graders was, that was an amazing answer you gave. Was just, it was so nice to hear that. And my second grade students, they really enjoyed it.
Good. And I think it's the perfect time of year to do this too, because it gives the second graders a chance to meet third grade teachers, and, you know, they start to feel like they're stepping up. So that's all good stuff.
Yeah.
We're filling the gaps. We're building the bridge.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you all so much. This is wonderful. I'm so glad that you decided to be a part of our Learn, Teach, Lead Friday debrief. Come back anytime. We're always happy to unpack whatever you're doing in your classrooms. And it's getting to be 4 o'clock. So I think that this group of hardworking teachers should go home for the weekend.
Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.